All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining me for the next 20 minutes. Uh, that's pretty rushed for a session in general, but the good news is that this particular session is intended to be lighthearted. Hopefully you'll get a little bit of a laugh or two out of it. Maybe we'll learn a lesson here or there as an aspect of cautionary tales, and maybe you'll just have a few moments of levity. If not, I apologize in advance and encourage you to write a critical review for Erland Sommerskog, and if you love it, then write one for Kevin Kline. So thanks so much. And a lot of great sessions going on right now, so I wanted to express gratitude that you're spending this time with me. I've been in the business for a long time, since the kind of middle, late 80s. And I've held many different jobs or job roles over the years. Like many of you, you get bored after a while, so maybe you stay working for the same company, but you change jobs. So I've been an enterprise architect and a manager, or I guess you could say I didn't do anything at that time. I started as a developer, a DBA, and a data scientist. At that time, we just called it statistics, except you used a computer to do all of your statistical modeling back during my days at NASA. So also one other footnote, if you haven't heard, I hopefully have circulated the news, but from 1:15 to 1:45, I will be in the O'Reilly booth signing copies of SQL in a Nutshell for giveaway. It's not a walnut shell. It's not a thin book. It's a coconut shell. It covers the ANSI ISO standard of SQL and then compares the 4 most popular platforms to that. So you can see how SQL Server, how Oracle, how Postgres, and how MySQL all compare to the standard. And I think the largest community of users who purchase the book are usually developers who sometimes work on all of those, or DBAs who sometimes work on all of those platforms. So I hope I motivate you to come and visit me at the booth. The good news is, or the bad news is, there's only 25 books. The good news is that it's $80 US, slightly less in Great British pounds or euros, but everyone will get a book. It's just that everyone after the 25th will get an ebook. Okay, sound like a good deal? Hope so, yes? All right, so I would like for this to be very interactive. So if you have a horror story to share, I want to hear them. And everyone else does too, but here's our preamble horror story. Okay, before we start the horror stories, this is the horror story. A friend was telling me how at the last time, I do this session every few years, and the last time I did this session, his coworker stood up and said, "Oh yes, I work for Philip at such and such a company, and he's such a dumb person that he did X, Y." Like, don't do that, please. Let's be a little bit veiled so that it doesn't get back to the boss or your coworkers. Let's say I have a friend who worked at this place, and this is what happened. Don't want to burn any bridges, right? So let's start off with our favorite topic, right? Bad bosses. Yeah? So anyone here worked for a great boss? Right? Yeah, it feels good, right? When you have a boss who knows how to manage to goals, who appreciates you for your value, they're a human being, right? But some of these people we have to work for are not, well, I guess they are human beings, but the negative side of humanity. So I'll start off with a story from my history, and maybe you have a story or two as well that you might like to share. So in my case, it wasn't my boss, it was a friend's boss, and I mentor a few people every year, usually career, not technology advice, and she said, I have a problem with my boss, Kevin. This is our youngest person in this large healthcare company to ever achieve the director position. And as you can expect, this person is kind of ego-driven. They've achieved a lot, and they're very good at what they do, but they are very focused on making the next achievement that is something that the people even higher on the hierarchy of this corporation we'll chatter about. And so the thing that this person is fixated on is our speed of delivery on certain kinds of SQL Server projects. In particular, this is pre-cloud, pre-VMs even. So it would take a long time to set up and provision a SQL Server running on Windows. And so in this case, my friend said, 2 times in the past, I have tried to implement a policy in which we put on all of the preventative maintenance, all of the scheduled tasks that need to happen, so that we get fewer service calls later on. This is before Ola Hallengren was even born, I think, if you know Ola's scripts, right? And so they had developed their own set of scripts as a DBA team and wanted to put those on. But the boss said no, because you're going to have to take an extra hour every time we set up a SQL server before you can deploy. And so what's important for me is making those deployments happen quickly. And she put together a very rational proposal. You know, if you give me an extra hour at the start, at the inception, we'll have so much better performance throughout. It's going to save us hours and hours of trouble tickets and pages in the middle of the night that wake us up. Fell on deaf ears. 2 times she made this proposal. She asked my advice. She said, what should I do? You know, this is clearly the best thing for the company. I said, well, you know, many managers are rational and effective, but many are not. And you can't use a rational appeal to a person who's not motivated by, if they're not motivated by rational decision making, it's not going to happen. So what is it that this person is motivated by? And she thought about it and she said, well, you know, they're very proud of the fact that they're the youngest person to achieve director. And I guess there's a certain amount of ego and prestige associated with the way that they run their operation. And I said, all right, let's use that. And so the next, we strategized a little bit. And the next week she went to her boss and she said, it wasn't even a meeting. It was like a, you know, in the hallway sort of thing. And she said, you know, I wish we could do something about our reputation problem as a team. And the manager said, what? What reputation problem are you talking about? And she says, well, we have a lot more service trouble tickets than any of the other administrative teams. You know, we get paged in the middle of the night a lot more often than anybody else. And a lot of interruptions to our customer services. And the manager said, well, what can she do about it? And what can we do about it? And she pulled out her other proposals from the past and said, you know, if you give me an extra hour ahead of time, none of this stuff will happen anymore. And he said, make it happen. Can you get it done this week? Yes, I can. And she did. So anyone else want to share a story from one of your bosses, you and your boss's interactions? Well, we could talk about this all day, right? Not only have they made this show, I think every country on the planet has their own version of this show. So not just bosses, but also teams, right? One of the biggest things that we deal with is technologists. And technologists have a certain way of approaching problems, they have a certain way of approaching each other, approaching their business users. You know, there's a certain reputation, a certain kind of stereotype in the wider world about IT people. Have you ever seen the girl with the dragon tattoo? Right? There's 2 kinds, typically I have experienced, 2 kinds of stereotypes. The first is someone like the girl with the dragon tattoo whose skin has not seen the light of day in perhaps decades. They have tattoos in really, you know, trend-setting ways, unusual piercings. They look really intense, and their eyes are almost square because they've been staring at that computer monitor in the dungeon that they work at. And if you have to go and ask them for help, they're like, leave me alone or I'll turn you into a frog and take away all of your user permissions. You know, so there's that mean kind. And then there's the arrogant kind. So the story I like to tell is I divorced in 2005 and I thank you, Lord, I managed to remarry in 2008. And while my now wife and I were dating, I told her I was an IT person. That's all I said. I didn't describe myself much more than that. And she said, oh God. And I was like, what does that mean? And so in her job, she was the lead scheduler for, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. We call it Music City because country music is made there, and about 70% of rock and roll music is made there, pop music. And she was the lead scheduler for the top voice doctors in the country there in Nashville. So every time she interacted with an IT person, that person was the one who came and fixed her Outlook or her network card. And every time that person would come up and say to her desk and say, I've read your trouble ticket. Could you tell me your symptoms of the problem? And she would explain it, and the person would go, oh God, get out of the way, let me fix your problem, and clickety-click. And she thought that that's the kind of IT person I was. But that's not any of you. You're not that person, right? But you probably work with that person. So anyone have a story they want to share about a troublesome teamwork situation? I'm not in Germany. I mean, come on, folks. Germans won't answer me when I ask questions like that. But in fact, they won't answer me at all. But unless it's Ben Weissman or one of the friendly folks we know. Okay. I won't spend too much time on this, but this is also a vendor session. So our commercial interruption is to remind you of the three great product monitoring and observability products that we offer at SolarWinds. In the SQL Server space, we have good, better, best. So our good observability platform, database observability, is part of SWO, SolarWinds Observability, our SaaS platform. We have DPA, which is actually loved more by developer types because it is very, very simple, and it gives you really good AI to help find anomalies, okay? And then our flagship product for SQL Sentry gives you incredible breadth across the Microsoft data platform, and it gives you incredible depth. So it's the only product out there that does Azure Synapse pools. It's the only product out there that gives you information about NUMA node misalignment, which is one of those top 5 or top 10% of the workloads out there. That's it. You know, the other 90% of us don't have to worry about NUMA node misalignment. So, all right, let's move on. Security, no big deal, right? You don't have to. We're database people. We don't have to worry about security, do we? Anyone? For years, I used to, as a DBA, I used to enjoy the fact that all I had to worry about were basically the grant, revoke, and deny statements, right? That's database stuff. I'm gonna focus on that. But that's not the end of the story, is it? I'm hoping someone has a GDPR story or something like that that they're willing to share. Anyone have sort of security, authentication, compliance issues they have experienced? I'll tell you one from a horror story from my very early days, back when I was using Oracle version 5 and Oracle version 6 at NASA. We had to go up to one of our very senior person's offices and explain that even though this is not officially classified information, for now it was supposed to be kept secure. And we noticed that she would log in to a terminal, not even an actual PC. She'd log into a terminal and leave it connected overnight, sometimes 3, 4, 5 days. And so we simply were there to ask if she would sign out every night and sign back in the next day. And she said, well, you know, I hate remembering passwords. Is that unfamiliar to us today? No, I freaking hate remembering passwords, right? In fact, I tell Google a lot of times to remember my passwords, and I still don't remember who has my passwords. But anyway, so she said, okay, no problem. I won't do that anymore. I'll log out at the end of the night. She then immediately took and wrote down her password on her big legal pad there on the, we're like, no, you can't do that either. We really need for you to remember your make it something you can remember. And she said, no problem. And she walked us out the door and we said, oh, thank you, that's great. And as we left the building, we saw that she had watched us go, and then she promptly wrote it in the dust of the window. And we're like, okay, something's not working here in this conversation. So that was one of my very ancient lessons learned about SQL horror stories. Okay, friends, let's move along here. How about you had a situation where you had a really bad recovery? Has anyone ever had this? Were you trying to the first one I had was way back SQL Server 4.21a, or maybe it was SQL 6. And that's what I learned, that SQL Server will let you back up databases all day long when they're corrupt, but it won't let you recover them when they're corrupt. And you only find out when you have to recover the database. So it was at that point that I learned long ago that you have to do your corruption checks beforehand, because I had to go back 10 days before I could find a non-corrupt copy of the database. And eventually, it's a long process where I could access the tables of the corrupted table, so I had to export all the tables that were corrupted, recover the database, and then reload the tables that were corrupted with the newest data so that we had a match. We had an RPO of, we got very close to near real time, but the RTO took multiple days for us to rebuild all of that. How about anyone here? You have a recovery story you'd like to tell? Yes, Rodney. Let's hold for 1 minute with a microphone.
Yeah, it's more to do with DBCC, check DB, rather than recovery. But I worked for a company that had a lot of third-party databases, and I was the new SQL DBA, so I was doing my diligence, and we got unrecoverable errors, and the database was actually used by the infrastructure team. So I went to them and said, we're getting these errors. I've gone and got the oldest backup, and it's in that as well. You might want to get in touch with the third party that supplied it. So they did, and the third party came back and said, that's okay, you don't use any objects in that part of the database. You'll be fine. To which I replied, when it goes wrong, talk to them, not me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they had a system that they were using, backing up, had an issue, and the vendor says, don't even worry about it, we don't care about that data, we're not using it.
Yeah, I mean, if we ever needed to restore that one, it probably wouldn't have worked, so.
Yeah, excellent, very good. Anyone else? Yes. Dave.
Hi, Kev.
Hey.
So I've had a customer who implemented TDE and then decided to keep their certificate on the C drive, and then got hit with Petra. That was fun.
I saw some thumbs up on that too from others in the audience. So that's happened. Stung you as well in your environment? Yes, and a little further back behind you, Dave.
Yep, so started my job as a DBA junior, and we encountered a database that wouldn't load through corruption on a SQL 2000 box. So I spent roughly a week getting used to DBCC page, so it's very much in at the deep end.
Very granular.
Managed to fix the issue, can't recall the details of it, but then discovered that the database was completely rebuilt at the weekend. So it was all just not needed.
All for naught.
Yeah,
right?
all for nothing.
Well, the bad news is we have 1 minute left. Isn't that crazy? I have a lot of other Yo Mama jokes that I'm sure you really want to see as we go along here. A actual query was posted in a user group where I was speaking, and this is the text of the query placed onto the billboard there. One other note is, and we're about to time, so I have to go quickly since we have to clear quickly. I do a monthly AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything kind of format. And it is kind of lighthearted, but I have a discussion prepared each time. And the topic for next Thursday, it's the last Thursday of each month. Next Thursday, we're talking about the impact of Broadcom acquiring VMware and the massive changes they've been making, since so many of us as DBAs are impacted by this. And with that, I'm sorry we're out of time. I feel like we're just getting rolling. We could go another 45 minutes. But feedback is a gift. So if you have a moment, I really would appreciate you letting me know about this, your thoughts about the session, about the event overall. And with that, I hope you'll come by and get a signed book between 1:15 and 1:45. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. I do appreciate you very much. Thank you.